Hi, my name is Erin, for those of you who don't remember. Um, I made some videos a while back, and then I stopped. A lot of things happened in my personal life that kind of made me want to not be so public. Um, it's been a rough year. I'm really glad 2016 is over, but at the same time, it's really scary, everything that's coming afterwards. Um, but I know many can relate to that feeling. It's not just me. Uh, Maybe I will get to the point where I talk a little bit in my videos about the things that happened that made me just stop making videos. But it's not just my story to tell, it's my family's as well. So I don't know that I feel super comfortable sharing personal things. My family and I just suffered an unexpected, very bad thing. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. For those of you who do remember and those who have never seen me before, hi, it's nice to meet you. And my name is Erin, and I was born with a very noticeable physical difference called radial club hands. And it manifests itself in different ways for different people. It's not very common. In fact, it's very rare. I think it's something like 1 in 1,000 American children are born with it. But it affects the radius bone in the forearms and the ulna, and it can have different effects. Most often, the result is a shorter limb because the bone is either truncated or it's missing. Now, those bones are significant bones in the skeleton because the radius bone gives us our opposable thumbs. So, just as a refresher and a reminder, I was born with this disorder, and it's not genetic. It's just something that can occur. There are genetic versions and variants, but it is just something that can happen. And in my particular case, I was even slightly more rare because most often when this happens, it occurs on one side. So you have one normal arm and one arm that's affected by the radial dysplasia is what it's called. So in my case, it was both arms, perfectly symmetrical. The radius bone wasn't deformed, it was missing entirely. So I was born without the radius bone, which is the bone in the forearm that makes it longer, and I was also born without opposable thumbs. I had no thumbs. I just had 4 fingers and that was it. The reason for that is because the radius bone is actually the bone that gives you the thumbs. So, I'll show you. Hi. Okay, so you see I now have 3 fingers, not 4 like I just said. And the reason for that is because when I was a baby, some fantastic surgeons gave me thumbs. So this is just a refresher. Those of you who have already watched my videos, you already know this about me. So this is what it looks like. You see that my arm is quite a bit shorter. What's the best way for me to do this? And it's kind of curved. So The bone that gives the length in the forearm is the radius bone. And it also gives someone with an average skeleton their thumbs. In my case, that was completely absent, both sides. And if you can imagine, my hands were kind of the way they are now, but they were just the fingers. So when I was born, they had to wait a bit because I was premature and very tiny. And I believe I lived in an incubator for a very long time. But once I was strong enough, I was very lucky to be a part of Cozier Children's Charities and in Louisville, Kentucky. And they also have really fantastic hand surgeons there. And they gave me thumbs. They gave me thumbs on both of my hands. I had 12 surgeries when I was an infant. And I couldn't be more grateful. In fact, I was an infant, so I don't remember any of those surgeries. And to me, I just always had thumbs. And I've always been, normal for me, which is probably not normal for most people, but I think most people also feel that way in some way. So that's just a refresher. I'm trying not to hide it, but I don't know what to do with my hands to get them into the frame. Maybe I should take up smoking and just go throughout the entire video. Well, that's a terrible idea, and I'm not going to do it. For those of you who already have seen my videos, you already know this, but I was also born an identical twin. I have a twin sister, and she's beautiful and smart and cool. And I'm not being vain when I say she's beautiful, because we actually look kind of different. She's taller, bigger eyes, she kind of Bambi thing going on, and she's also much smarter than I am. But I was born an identical twin, and we look similar enough, and she does not have any deformity. She was not born with radial club hands or any deformity whatsoever. She has a birthmark, but that's it. And it's very subtle on her leg. Lucky girl. I also got all the allergies, so I don't know really what happened genetically there, but I got the raw end of the deal in some ways. I'm allergic to peaches, which I really like, and other stuff. But growing up an identical twin, but we had this one huge, obvious, not hideable difference, was very interesting. And it was hard for both of us, not just for me, because we're very close. She's my best friend, and in many ways we're very similar. Our interests very similar. We're annoying twins, where when we get together, it's like we speak our own language. But being different from each other in such a significant way was strange. There are some charming parts about the story, and some not so charming parts. The charming part is when we were born, and we were both very premature, so we were both in the hospital for a while. And then my parents had to navigate how to deal with me. I had a hole in my heart, and I had this deformity, and it required extensive surgery for me to even hope to have a normal life. So they were very young parents, and they were new to this whole thing, and they had twins, for one thing. Also, the ultrasound technician had read the ultrasounds wrong, so they expected boys, and they got girls. And also, we were not the healthiest children in the world. So, they went through this with us, and they went through the surgeries with me. And when I finally came home after all the surgeries, I had a cast on both arms, very symmetrical. And they were on there for months, and we were already developing and growing because they had to wait until we were a few months old before they did the surgeries to make sure that we were all right. And my sister kind of went into being able to crawl, and while I had the casts on, and she did it about one time, and then she realized that I couldn't because I still had casts on. I couldn't crawl, and she didn't crawl again until my casts were off and I could crawl too. So that's the charming part. Very cute. The not so cute part is that my sister never misses an opportunity to remind people that I'm the older twin by 5 minutes. It's very important to her that you know that. I'm the eldest by 5 minutes. She's the baby. And because in part because of my sister, and owing very much to my parents and all of the people that I grew up with, we were homeschooled and very, very sheltered. But because of the way that my parents raised me, and because I had my sister, I was very lucky. Throughout my childhood, I really didn't realize that I had something that was so different. And I knew that I was physically different than other people, than everyone I knew and everyone I ever met, but it didn't bother me because the way that my parents handled it, and I don't know if this was planned out or if it was just something that they did what they felt was right, but they never expected that I couldn't do anything. They let my sister and I learn at the same pace, and they watched to see if there was anything that I had a hard time doing. And if I asked for something, they would help me, but they never offered. And because of that, I adapted, never feeling like I couldn't do anything. So I learned at the same pace my sister did to write and draw. My parents are artists, and really, really good artists. And we loved to draw when we were kids. We loved to build things and make things and use our hands. And I'm sorry, that was loud. That goes off now. And I never had a hard time. It never occurred to me that I could have a hard time. I did things differently, but it wasn't conscious that I was doing it differently. The way I hold a pen is slightly different. But I can hold a pen. So it's like that. I learned to draw and sew and build things and cook and climb and fall off things, and I learned everything pretty much like a normal kid. And because my parents didn't expect that I was going to have problems and a hard time, I didn't. Okay, so sometimes, like any kid, I couldn't cut a straight line. I'd come to my parents and ask them to cut something for me. I couldn't open a bottle that was really hard, and I'd come to them and ask them to open it for me. But my sister did the same thing. I mean, that's a kid thing. Um, Nowadays, I just get handsome men near me to open bottles for me if I need it. Um, I don't usually need it though. So the way we were raised was very fortunate for most of our growing up. And it was good for both of us, I think. Um, my parents are very loving, artistic people, and they decided to homeschool us, and they made the decision largely because of me. I think I think it had a lot to do with the fact that they really loved us and they wanted to shelter us, and they had misgivings about the education system in our city. But the final nail in the coffin of that was they took us to school in their district that they could afford. And the school wanted to they wanted to separate my sister and I, and they wanted to put me in a special education class. My parents saw no reason for me to be there, mentally and developmentally, and it was only because I looked different. And they realized that the school was going to shift gears and assume that I had trouble where I hadn't necessarily had any trouble yet. So my parents just decided, no way, that's not going to happen. They kept us home. My father was our teacher, and um, our household already had a culture of learning anyway, so um, it wasn't that big of a leap. We had floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that my father built in the living room. I think I remember climbing them. Anyway, for years that was a good thing and it was a good idea, but we were very sheltered, and my parents didn't really know how to socialize us with kids our age, so we grew up around really cool adults and not people our own age, but really good people and really interesting people. But we were shy. We were very, very shy, and despite being really good for us, being homeschooled, it didn't help the shyness. I know a lot of people can relate to this shyness and separation anxiety and traumatic episodes in their childhood involving tutus, but in their one effort to socialize us with kids our age, my mother took us to a dance class because she was a dancer when she was younger, and we were uncoordinated, clumsy children that hurt ourselves frequently, so she thought that she could kill two birds with one stone. We would socialize with people our own age and learn valuable lessons about coordination. We were about 6, I think, and being these shy little creatures that were not used to being around kids or adults we didn't know very well, she went into the hall, leaving us in the class. It was kind of an orientation class, and we were sitting in a circle with the other kids. And as soon as she went out of the room, she stayed. She was looking through the door, probably because she anticipated something horrible was about to happen. And both my sister and I burst into tears and started sobbing hysterically. And that was the end of that. And that was pretty much the end of that, even at trying to socialize us with people our own age, until we were teenagers. And becoming teenagers actually was the beginning of the hard times. It was very, very hard. Being a teenager is hard no matter what. I mean, there are a lot of physiological reasons for that. You have hormones, a complete shift in perspective and awareness, and what you want and what you're interested in and who you are as a person is completely turned on its head, and it's hard for anyone. Um, to top it off, my family was going through a hard time um, at the time. About when I was 12 to 14 was, well, 12 to 15 was a time of dramatic upheaval and change for my family in general. And it wasn't the most stable environment. We were all going through something. And my sister and I, well, we were shy, anxious, worried about our parents, worried about life as we knew it, and we were becoming young women. And that turned the whole thing on its head. I started to become aware of being different. I started to care. My sister started to become aware that I was different. And I think in her way she started to care. And I'm not saying that she judged me or anything like, no. I wasn't a negative for her. But the more she became aware of it, when we were kids, neither of us thought about it, ever. But as we became older, we both became aware of it, and for her, I think it caused an overwhelming amount of worry and guilt. I guess it's kind of like survivor's guilt, because she didn't have what I have, and she didn't have the burden. She couldn't share it with me. That's horrible and wrong, but really understandable. The problem with that is, well, there are lots of problems with it. There's nothing my sister could have done, and there's nothing she could have controlled about my being different. But still, because she's sensitive and sweet and full of empathy, she felt the burden of that. Maybe more than I did. Meanwhile, I was starting to become aware of being different, and I became really bitter. As you get older, you realize that the world that you grow up in is not always as stable or as permanent as you think it is. And I was realizing that the world that I found myself in was very fragile at best, and at worst deteriorating rapidly. And I knew that I had to find a way to be in the world in a different way. But as I came to this realization, and I was terrified, because during that time, the life that I had grown up with and the life that I knew was disappearing for a lot of reasons. Just what my family was going through at the time, what my parents were dealing with. And I was terrified of losing it. I had no idea where to turn. And I realized simultaneously that I needed to find a way for myself in the world. And it also occurred to me very harshly, for the first time in my life, that I might actually have a pretty hard time. I was very shy. I was very sheltered. I can count on one of my hands the amount of times that I spoke to someone my own age from 6 to 15. It was very infrequent. And I realized that I have something that causes instant judgment. I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean judgmental in a bad way, but it causes someone to experience something that leads them to a conclusion, a judgment. And in the superficial world that we live in, particularly, unfortunately, in adolescence and as teenagers, that was horrible to realize. At the same time, my sister was going through her own insecurity. She was also shy, she was also sheltered, and she's very sensitive. And she had a really rough time. And I became very bitter because I was going through the normal teenage change, emotions, brattiness, hormonal, emotional craziness, while my family was going through this separate thing that was causing a lot of upheaval, while being different and suddenly being aware of it for the first time in my life. For the first time in my life, when I was 14, it occurred to me, I'm deformed. I have a deformity. In the books that I read, people who were deformed or had deformities or mental problems or physical differences or ailments of any variety, they were killed or locked in towers, never to be seen again. I mean, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. That was my point of reference. And I kind of felt like I had been in that position. Because suddenly the being homeschooled and being sheltered and protected felt like being hidden. And I became so bitter, so very quickly bitter. I was insecure. I was experiencing acne for the first time. I was realizing that I have chronic bags under my eyes because of being Irish, which sucks. Frizzy hair. I went through a phase of dyeing it bright red and have baby bangs. I kind of looked like Frankenstein because my face is square anyway. It wasn't my best look. I was insecure about my crooked teeth. I was insecure about being homeschooled. I was insecure about possibly not being intelligent enough. I was insecure about not knowing how to interact with people my own age and being very awkward. I was insecure about the fact that I have a big nose and little eyes, and it's adolescence, it's puberty. I was pretty much insecure about everything. And my sister was too. Yeah, you name it, we were insecure about it. But that's normal. And the big cherry on the top of my anxiety sundae was suddenly being aware that I have ridiculously short arms that are kind of twisted looking and crooked, and I have a Simpson number of fingers on my hands. And it was not great. I became so bitter that I can't even imagine what it was like to deal with me. Suddenly my best friend, my sister, was, if not quite my enemy, someone that I could not understand. And her with me, she could not understand. she became very concerned and overprotective, which she'd never been before, because it had never occurred to either of us growing up that I was different. But once puberty hit, and it did, my sister started going through her own sort of her gauntlet of puberty and adolescent angst, and we simultaneously realized that I was different and deformed and had a difficult path, and my reaction was to become almost paralyzed by anger and bitterness and fear. And my sister's reaction was to become consumed with worry, anxiety, fretting, and that pushed me over the edge because I'd never gotten that from her before. I'd never really gotten that from anyone. And it just kind of reinforced, I'm different, I'm different, I'm different. This is going to be harder for me. This is going to be so much harder for me. And it compounded this self-pity, this hard diamond of self-pity that was growing inside of me. And it really turned me against her because it reminded me that I was different. It kind of felt like salt in the wound. And I also could not understand why my sister, my beautiful, perfect, normal sister, had any of the insecurities that she had. Perfectly normal insecurities for any young, shy teenager. Being a girl can suck. But I had no empathy. None. I didn't understand it. I didn't want to understand it. I wanted to wrap myself in a cocoon of anger and self-pity and say, I'm screwed. There's no point. And hey, why are you crying? Why are you sad? Why are you worried about X, Y, Z? You don't have the right. I'm the one who's different. I'm the one who's in pain. You're not in pain. You have no idea what it is. That is how I was when I was 14. And it may come as a surprise to my family, actually, because I did try to hide it. My sister and I fought, but it was never clear why we fought. And I've had to think about it and really look at myself in very hard light to come to the conclusion that that's what I was thinking back then. That's how I felt. I'm not proud of it. And I'm not proud of it, but I'm grateful because it led me to a very valuable conclusion. One day, as puberty was ending, I don't think it's a coincidence, I was still going through a lot, and I was in my early 20s. I'm 30 now. Sorry, that derailed me. That was a horrible sentence. I don't think I've said that before. Anywho, I was in my early 20s, and I was going through some things. My mother wasn't at our house. She had left for a while, and my sister had moved out. My sister was off going through her own thing, and she was going through a gauntlet of, well, crap. And I was staying at home, and I lived with my father at our house, and I kind of cast myself in a role of caregiving. But that is awfully self-congratulatory. It's not super accurate. I just couldn't imagine having a life. So I was the one who stayed, and I tried to make everything the way it had been. But that wasn't possible anymore. So I was starting to realize that I needed to be in the world, and one day I just started having panic attacks. I had nightmares every night, and my hair started falling out, and I had acne all over my face, which I'm not really used to. And sorry, I'm getting more comfortable. This is a long video. It doesn't feature my hands very much. Should I just develop a puppet show or something just to show you guys that I have this thing? Anyway, boy, I lost my train of thought. So I started having panic attacks every day. I was losing my hair and covered in acne and heart palpitations, couldn't breathe, pain in my chest every day. And I decided that was the first moment that I felt alive. For those months, it was about 5 or 6 months I felt that way. And what was happening was I was realizing that I couldn't stay the way I was staying, in this cocoon of bitterness, doing nothing, being a part of nothing, just wishing things could go back to the way they had been when I was a child. I actually realized during that time that I'm human and I could have a future. It had never occurred to me before. From the moment that I became aware of being different, I slammed the door shut on having a life. I just thought, it's too much to overcome. There's no way. And that's why I was so miserable for so long. When I realized that I could have a future, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Nothing has ever been more terrifying than that realization, because it meant I had to try. I had to try. And I also had to look at myself and fully take stock of what I thought about the world and myself in it, and how I'd been treating others. So I took stock of my relationship with my sister in particular, and she was going through a hard time during this period, but she wasn't at our house. It was separate from that, and I had spent so much time resenting her that when I realized that she had all the same pain and insecurity and even self-loathing, anxiety, fears that I have, that I've always had, that since adolescence, she had the same experience. In fact, looking at her, I wondered if maybe she felt it more strongly than I did. Just because I have something that's easy to point to and say, well, I have this, so I'm obviously in a lot of pain and I obviously have a very hard life. Even though I have that, isn't that a cop-out? Isn't it a way of saying I'm more significant? What I experience is more significant than what you experience? That's crap. And as soon as I realized it was crap, I was able to realize what she was going through. And as soon as I was able to realize what my sister is going through, even though to me she's perfect, she's beautiful, she's smart, and there's nothing wrong with her, that's not how she felt. And when I realized that, it was like a bomb going off in my perspective and my conscience, because I realized that that applies to everybody. I can go through life feeling like I've been handed a raw deal, and like my life is automatically hard. Except, what if my life is not harder because of my arms? What if it's more easy because of my arms? Because I get an automatic excuse. I get a get out of jail free card. I get to say, this is why I'm XYZ. This is why I'm a broken person. This is why I'm unhappy. This is why I haven't done anything. And then I get to say, and I have it so much worse than you do. How dare you feel bad for yourself? Look at me. Maybe I am lucky. No. The reason I am lucky to be different is because once I opened myself up to it, it did help me achieve a perspective that I don't know if many people have the opportunity to have. The perspective is this: insecurity, pain, these are negative words, these are bad things, but they're universal. If you talk to anyone, they're going to have a story or an experience of something that brought them pain, and something about their life or themselves that they are insecure about, that brings them pain and anxiety. Everyone has that. And there are no degrees. You feel this, and it's so debilitating. It just warps your perspective of the world and life. It warped me for, 12 years. And it really is isolating. Insecurity is such a poisonous feeling, but it's universal. It's something that we all have in common, but it is also very alienating. It's strange because it is a universal phenomenon. We share it, but it separates us. Because one of two things happens. Either we feel like our pain is so great that no one can possibly understand it, and we don't see the pain in others. We don't give them any of the benefit of the doubt. We don't give them any empathy. Or we have this pain and this insecurity, but we see others and we think they must have it so much worse, so why do I feel this bad? And you end up hating yourself for feeling the way that you do. And that's what happened to my sister. We were on the opposite ends of that. I thought no one could possibly experience my pain, and that my pain was so vast that no one else's was legitimate. And my sister felt this enormous pain and anxiety and insecurity, and she felt terrible for it. She felt guilty. She felt like she was wrong. Those are very poisonous feelings. And as soon as I became aware of that, okay, I have short arms. Big deal. You watching this, you have something that is different, that makes you insecure about yourself, something that you worry about. It might be something very minor seeming, but it's not to you. And we have that in common. See, most people would think that I would be insecure about my arms, and I was, briefly. And sometimes it makes finding coats hard and things like that. I'm sorry, I've been sick. But that's not my chief insecurity. I'm much more insecure about other things, like my stupid Irish chronic eye bags. So also insecurity is not necessarily what you expect it to be. Everybody's different. So what I want to impart on people is that it's okay to be different. You can actually turn being different and being insecure into a strength. Because you have to realize that insecurity is about one of the only things that we all have in common. I tend to think we have a lot more in common than we realize, but insecurity is definitely something that we all have in common. So first you have to realize you're not alone. And second, how do we turn it into a strength? For me, I'm not completely there yet, but I'm getting there. I moved to New York because I wanted to challenge myself and just become completely different. So I decided to never hide my arms. I sort of feel like I am right now, but just it's the angle of the video. Okay, I'll just hold my hands like this for the rest of the video. And I decided there's nothing I can do about my difference, so I'm kind of lucky there. I can't even worry about it. I'm not gonna walk outside when it's 100 degrees out wearing something that covers my arms. And then what do I do if I have to use my hands? It's not possible. So I'm kind of lucky in that way, because either I stay inside forever and do nothing, which was most of my childhood, or I just have to go out. And I get stares, and people talk to me about it, and people ask me about it, and I see parents just die inside when their children come up to me and want to know. And I'm always happy because I like teaching people that it's okay. It doesn't bother me. Even if someone is rude, it doesn't really bother me. And that's how I've turned my weakness into a strength. Yes, I am still insecure about it. I've actually never said that before. But I am. Sometimes I will just be maybe walking into a crowded place like a restaurant, and I feel like I look nice. I've put in an effort, and I do a lot of things by myself. I'm just one of those people. I bring a book, and I enjoy going to a bar or a coffee shop and sitting down and reading, and I like my own company. But sometimes when I'm walking into a situation like that, I'll just feel like all these people are looking at me, and I have tiny little chicken wing arms. And I feel for a second embarrassed. And then I just like, what am I gonna do? What else could I possibly do? So I just live with it. And the more I live with it every day, the more it doesn't define me, and the more of a strength it becomes. So I'm going to be making more of these videos. I'm going to ramble a lot, but I really want to be open and honest. Open and honest about the fact that I'm insecure about my hair, apparently. I want to be open and honest to all of you. I want to have a frank, sometimes rambling conversation about insecurity and personal strength, and learning how to cope in the world of ours. I hope you'll join me in this conversation. I'd also like to be able to offer some advice if I'm able, or perspective, and if you ask me questions, I'll always answer them. No question is too stupid. I learned that from Reddit. Reddit has a lot of potentially stupid questions, but I'm sticking to that. No question is stupid. Alright, I have to go now because I've rambled for 50 minutes. 49 minutes and 40 seconds. Okay, bye.